Marketing your podcast and your business on LinkedIn can feel a bit daunting, especially if it's not a platform that you particularly know a lot about or know how to be strategic with. Today, we have Neil Schaefer on the podcast to talk all about creating a LinkedIn strategy that works for you, making sure that it's tied to your capacity, and even something about marketing that blew my mind. Please join me in welcoming Neil to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Neil. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. If you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your show.
Sure. My name is Neil Schaefer. I am the host of the Your Digital Marketing Coach podcast. And as the name implies, I am a digital marketing consultant, author, speaker, teach at some universities. So I consider myself an educator, really love to help, whether it's one-on-one, helping small business owners, entrepreneurs with their digital marketing strategy, or having people consume my books and helping them get value from that. I love to help and serve.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I have a degree in marketing and it's a bachelor's, so I'm sure it's not even anywhere near what kind of degrees you had to get to teach at universities. But I'm curious, what are some of those maybe timeless things that we lose sight of with all of the social media marketing that is inundated today? And marketing has shifted a bit over the years, but what are maybe one or two things that has not changed in the last 20 years of marketing that we could really utilize for our businesses and our podcasts?
It's funny you say that, Lisa. First of all, I was a Asian studies major. I went to a liberal arts college, and I never took one class on marketing at university because they didn't have any, yet I teach it at university. So go figure. It's a new world out there. Don't let the lack of a degree, don't allow that to say you can't do something, is the first thing I want to say for everybody listening. I want to encourage you. The second thing is, it's funny, I just came back from a writer's conference because I write books as well. This was last week in London. And someone was on stage saying, you know what? With AI, we can create anything we want, right? Everything we wanted to create, AI will do it for us. We now need to get back to basics because everything we always wanted to do is doable. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And so your question really resonated with me because it really comes down to who are you? What is your brand? What is your mission? What are you trying to achieve? Who is your target audience? What is the messaging that's going to connect with them? And that's really, AI can do a lot for you, but it can't decide for you what that's going to be. You have to make the final call, right? Or you need to do the final A/B testing, whatever it is. So I do think it really comes down to that. I know we're going to talk about LinkedIn today, and I just came off my monthly mastermind group call, and the messaging of one person was just off. And when the messaging is off, you might get lots of views, you might get downloads, but you're attracting the wrong person and it's not going to convert. Right. So it really does come down to the basics, right? That marketing funnel. And there have been some that says, oh, the funnel no longer exists, but it does come down to people find out about you, they get to learn more about you, they consume your content, and then where are they going to go from there? So there is somewhat of a funnel that exists today. So those are the things I'd say. And I know it's like bread and butter basic stuff, but it's always great once in a while. With my clients, it's like, hey, let's do a quarterly audit. Look at even your podcast description. Does it still serve what you're doing now, what your podcast is about, what your offer is about, your LinkedIn profile, your social media content? It's always great to align. And especially with AI, things are changing so quickly and it's so easy to align again. It's a great exercise to do every once in a while.
Yes, I was at some type of AI workshop or something that I went to recently. And if you're using an AI tool a lot, ask it, what do you know about me? What do you know about my audience? And is that actually right? Because sometimes we might say, oh, this is the audience I want to serve. But like, who are you actually serving? And are those the people that you want to continue to attract? And if not, then you do need to adjust that messaging. And I think that's so important. I love that idea of a regular audit. And there are tools, right? AI tools and other ones, or strategists like yourself who can help us get clearer on our messaging to ensure that we're attracting the right people, which I think is so incredibly important. So let's talk about LinkedIn. Sometimes it can feel like the Wild West if we're not on there regularly. What are maybe those first few starting points, those things that we need to make sure are very strategically placed to ensure that we are going to be utilizing that tool in the best way?
The first thing is what everybody says about any social network. So you want to go big on TikTok, make sure you first prime your account by actually consuming other people's videos, liking them, understanding what good videos look like, and then replicating that, right? YouTube, spend 3 months just consuming videos. Every expert for every network will tell you the same thing. And it's true. It's like with podcasting. I launched my podcast, Your Digital Marketing Coach, with a different name back in 2013. And I had never listened to a podcast myself. And then I took a few years off and I came back in 2019. I was publishing a new book and I really wanted to leverage the podcast. And I started listening to podcasts. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong the entire time. And it's one of those things, if you're not consuming the content, you're not going to be able to get it. And it's going to seem like the Wild West. So step number one is actually spend time every day on LinkedIn, right?
Ooh,
Spend 15 minutes a day.
let's talk about that real quick because that is something that
It's
I
universal, any social network, right?
yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it that way, right? Yes, it makes sense that you would do that, but usually people go, "Oh, make sure your bio is optimized. Make sure that your about is optimized. Make sure these things are right." That's where I think a lot of our brains go, or a lot of the strategists be like, "Oh, hit this first." But it's like you said, it's so important that we understand how these platforms are actually working in order to create content that actually works for these platforms. Oh, I don't know why this is just such an aha moment for me, but this is what? That's wild. And again, when I started my podcast, I had been listening to podcasts. I had guested on podcasts. And so going into it, it was easy to be like, oh, here's the kind of podcast I want to create. And it makes sense, but I don't think that's how we tend to approach new platforms. It's, oh, I need to just, oh, this person's popular. What are they doing real quick? Let's go ahead and just jump off of that or copy paste maybe and with some adjustments what they're doing and then start creating content. But what you're saying is really take a few months. Don't just jump in and try to create a bunch of content. Make sure that you're actually creating the content that the platform will promote or will show to the right people. And that's so, yeah, aha moment for me.
Yeah, and you don't need to take a few months, but even just a week or two of doing that, because I feel, and I've written about this like many moons ago when I was talking about Twitter, when people are like, Twitter is like the Wild West, I would always say, find a role model. And I'm going to say the same thing about LinkedIn. Find a role model. Could be a podcaster, could be someone in the same industry, could be someone in a different industry, but someone that's doing something similar that looks like they're getting success, at least from the engagement on their content, right?
Yeah.
And find a few role models. And the great thing is with AI, you could use their profiles and mimic your own profile based on what you see of their profile that you like. You could be looking at their content and use that as, I'm not going to say mimic, but as a way to be inspired
Right.
and to inspire the AI to create content. But it does then make it a lot easier to understand what LinkedIn is about. And the first thing, obviously, the profile is important, but it's also just getting connected with everybody that you know, everybody you went to school with, that you work together with, those business cards, wherever they are, still hanging around on your desk. Just that art of getting connected with people and reminding them of who you are, that, hey, I'm on LinkedIn looking to be more active here. That can really help jumpstart things. So those are, I don't know what order I'd put them because you do need the profile as well when you reach out to people so that they remember who you are. But just spending some time before you even start posting, trying to figure out what people are posting, doing some searches. LinkedIn's a big search engine. What are people talking about when they're talking about podcasting or whatever it is? And that'll give you a really good feel for the content there.
So when you think about LinkedIn tools and the things that they have available on their end, like newsletters, right? Where if someone's not familiar with a newsletter, you can create a post, an article, blog, whatever you want to call it, and have long form content that gets then emailed to anyone who has subscribed to that newsletter from LinkedIn. So it shows up in their actual inbox in their email, which is pretty cool. Is that a tool that maybe we should be utilizing on LinkedIn as podcasters? Like, how much kind of duplicate content should we be creating on our website, LinkedIn, as well as maybe copying and pasting to other social platforms? Or do we need to have a specific LinkedIn strategy just for LinkedIn?
Okay, so not to blow your mind or confuse you, but other social networks, there's only a few different types of content you can post. Like TikTok, I know some people post like photos and slideshows, but it's primarily short form video, right? YouTube, it's either horizontal video, vertical video, you get the point. LinkedIn actually has 12 different types of content formats you can post.
Wow.
So the newsletter or long form article is one of those types. You can do a vertical video, horizontal video, right? You can do a PDF, which they call carousels, not to confuse you with a multiple photo gallery post. So there's a lot of different things you can use to tell your story. And each one of these, if you understand the way social media algorithms work, are promoted more at different times. So there was a time a few years ago when like LinkedIn polls were viral. Like every time you logged into LinkedIn, you saw a poll. And then people got sick of them. And then they say, okay, people are spamming it and we should stop promoting them. Currently, I'd say of those types of formats, obviously having a image, we see those selfie shots are very popular. Multiple image shots are popular. Those PDFs are popular. And another popular one are the newsletters. And videos are popular as well, but we'll go into that separately. But the newsletter I have found over the last year, when I look at all the different types of formats in which I publish content, I look at engagement and impressions, the newsletter has always given me the most impressions. And I think the reason is it keeps people on the platform longer, like a video does. But how many people are going to go past 5 seconds of your video? If they're reading a long form article, it's generally going to be more than 5 seconds. So that's one reason. Another reason is we're recently finding with large language models like ChatGPT, they prefer to link to Reddit articles. They're also using those LinkedIn articles, which come from newsletters, as a primary source as well. So there's 2 different studies found this over the last 2 weeks that we're seeing a lot more of that. And I think you see more LinkedIn articles in Google search results as well. At least I do. The other thing is that people can subscribe to the newsletter. So it might get into their inbox if they have the setting that allows them to get those notifications in their inbox. Not everybody does, but there is a chance you'll hit the inbox. But for me, the more important thing that a lot of people forget about the newsletters is it is a subscribable media, meaning that anybody can subscribe to your newsletter, whether they follow you or not. And it's not apparent to everybody else, but if you were to go into your own newsletter and it'll say how many subscribers you have, you can click on that and then actually see the people subscribed. And you'll see second degree connections, third degree connections. And then you can reach out to them and say, hey, thanks for subscribing to my newsletter. Let's connect.
Right.
And can use that to build this relationship because everything on LinkedIn, it's all about relationships. And at the end of the day, when we're building business, right, if we're in a growth mindset, every customer begins with a relationship. Maybe they listen to your podcast. Maybe they subscribe to your newsletter. But even if they listen to your podcast, you have no way of getting to know who they are unless, your call to action, they heed it. But with a newsletter, you'll actually see the people that subscribe. So it's one of these hacks. Every day or maybe once a week, I'll go in, who are the new subscribers, and then send them a connection request. And that's another benefit of doing a newsletter. So the next question then, Alicia, that you asked is, what about like the whole duplicate content? So you have blog content. My podcast show notes are different than my blog content. A lot of people say podcast show notes do really well for SEO. I do not think they do well for SEO.
I don't think so
SEO
either.
requires a different approach, right? But I still have them. I still have the podcast subdomain. And I use one of those podcast website builders and they're there. So the LinkedIn newsletter article, if you wanted to talk about your podcast, what I do is I absolutely feed it through AI and I repurpose it into a format more like what a LinkedIn newsletter looks like, which is generally a little bit shorter. It's more in a conversational tone. And you can actually include, if you share, you can't do it with other platforms, but with a Spotify link of your episode, you can actually embed that in a LinkedIn newsletter. So I will embed that. So there is a way to listen to Spotify, but it becomes a newsletter article that stands on its own. So what is the main point of the podcast? And how can I put that into a 700 to 1,000 word article with that Spotify widget at the bottom, reminding them that this comes from the podcast, which they can listen to. And if it's an interview, I can also include I can tag the person I interview, and I can use the thumbnail from the actual podcast episode as the thumbnail for the LinkedIn newsletter. So that would be my approach that I would recommend. I tend to only do newsletters for my solo episodes. I do half solo, half interview. So the solo episodes are more like thought leadership, and they're a lot easier to create into this type of newsletter article. And they truly represent my thoughts on something. But you could do it with the interview as well. I would just stick to this concept of what are people going to get out of it? I know that we want to push our podcast and downloads, but what's in it for them, the reader? So you really want to make it a concise summary of, what is like one of the points you talked about that would provide an educational moment that people would be interested in learning about. And that would be my approach with the newsletter. And it's what I do to repurpose my own podcast episodes. And then there's no duplicate content. You have your show notes on your podcast. You have your blog post, which is different, obviously. And then you have this LinkedIn newsletter, which is different than a blog post as well. You're not worried about like SEO keywords and all that. make it a natural conversation to engage people.
I love that. And I think too, with SEO, it's going to trust a LinkedIn article more than it's going to trust your blog post. So when your
Yeah.
content, like if someone's searching for your content, your LinkedIn article is more likely to show up than a website that Google's, do we trust it? Do we know it? Do we like it? LinkedIn's always going to rank higher than a personal
Yeah,
website.
exactly. And it's why I tell people when you don't have a LinkedIn profile, once you have a LinkedIn profile, it is your professional website and it's always going to have better domain rating than your blog, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. In fact, you might want to save your best for your LinkedIn newsletter. But I do think you need a blog for discoverability, especially with large language models with AI. They're searching for sources, they're trying to connect the points. So, do blog, but the LinkedIn newsletter can be really strategic for your podcast when done in that way.
Yeah, definitely agree. What about how much of a balance we need to have between the types of content that we're creating? Not necessarily the medium, but podcast related content versus maybe some general thought leadership content versus, oh, here's something happening in the industry and I want to talk about it. Like, how much do we need to sprinkle in? Because one thing that I noticed in Q4 of 2025, well, more like Q3, was I was not getting any traction on any of my social media platforms for sharing about my podcast, but I also wasn't sharing about any other content, just the podcast. And I was like, why am I putting
Yeah.
all this effort into something that's not seeing a return at all on investment for me? So I switched to not posting on social media at all for my podcast specifically. And then when I have inklings or ideas or things that I'm like, ooh, this is a good kind of trend I'm seeing, let's talk about it, then I feel like I can post about those kinds of things. But if someone who is, okay, I'm posting about my podcast every 2 weeks, every week that it comes out, how much more content do I need to be also sprinkling in there to almost trick the algorithm into showing the podcast content also to my audience?
Yeah, I realized long ago that when I shared podcast content on social media, it got no traction because that's not what people are there for. So I also think that we have to remember that not everybody is a podcast listener, but the podcast serves a purpose. Podcast is part of our entire business. It is a type of content marketing. So if we don't necessarily need to promote the podcast itself, but we can promote the content that we talk about, like I mentioned with that LinkedIn newsletter, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to promote. I think the best way to promote a podcast is actually to do podcast advertising like Overcast. Some of those sites allow you to do that where you're reaching people directly. It's like me, instead of promoting a book on Facebook, trying to get people to Amazon, I'll use Amazon ads.
Right.
It's the same concept. So the other way of doing that with LinkedIn is literally to invite people onto your podcast, people that have a big following on LinkedIn with the hope that they're going to share that episode with their audience that they were on your podcast. So that's obviously a tried and true tactic. But if you really want to go the route of promoting your podcast, it first of all comes down to how often can you post? How often can you commit to posting? If you can only post once a week and you podcast once a week, then that's going to be your post. But instead of trying to lead people to your podcast, because the minute you put a link in your post, it's automatically devalued by the algorithm. So it's going to be in the comment. But you know what? There's different ways. The LinkedIn newsletter approach to promote your podcast. There's a vertical short form video way to promote your podcast. I would experiment with different content formats to see what gets the most engagement, knowing that indirectly you're promoting your podcast. It may not lead to a direct click of the link in your comment. It might not lead to a direct download, but it is promoting what you do. And hopefully those that listen to the podcast will check it out. I think that's all we can hope for in any social platform. So I know that's not the answer you wanted, but if it's like, no, I want NEAL, Alyssa, I can do twice a week. Okay. Outside of the podcast, then what is going to be that second type of content? Is it going to be more about the thought leadership type of content? Is it going to be more engagement type of content, more life hacks or what you learned in business? Is it going to be more of that curated content of commenting on the latest industry trends? That's going to come down to your branding, your industry, your messaging. But it really comes down to doing some sort of A/B test of testing out these different content types and content formats over the course of 90 days and seeing what sticks and doubling down. It's like any other social platform, like even your podcast, right? Of finding those topics that really resonate with people and doubling down. It's the same thing you want to do on LinkedIn or any social network. But with LinkedIn, it's not just the topic, but also that content format that you need to figure out because the algorithm is just always changing.
Yeah. Oh, you are speaking my language because I am constantly saying your capacity is the priority always.
Yeah.
Don't let someone tell
And
you.
mental health.
Yes, and your mental health. So important. Like, you cannot stretch yourself so thin that you're only giving little bits of yourself to all this stuff. Pick one platform and focus on that for a while. If LinkedIn is it, then this is a great episode for you. Or go check out what Neil's doing. Go copy maybe what he's doing and see what he's doing on, not copy. Please don't copy people, but get inspiration from,
Inspiration,
yes,
yeah.
from what Neil's doing.
I like to quote Marie Kondo. I don't know how many Marie Kondo fans are out there, but does it spark joy? Does being on LinkedIn spark joy? Because if it doesn't spark joy, it's not going to be fun. Find the social network that sparks joy. But once you spend some time on LinkedIn and you get the feeling for what it's about and you see its potential and it does, you do start having fun engaging on it and posting content, then go for it. But yeah, if it's not fun, you're not going to be successful, in all honesty.
Yes. I love that so much. It's so important. And I also really enjoyed what you said about testing it for 90 days, because I think so often we're like, that didn't work and I just posted it yesterday. Let's give it a little
Yeah.
bit of time. Let's try a few different things, see what's actually working, and then adjust course, or maybe change course, redirect, whatever we got to do. Because it could simply be that the content is right, but your messaging is off, or maybe you're not clear on that goal. And so every post is leading people to a different thing. No, get clear on that goal, get clear on where you want them to take action. And then I think too, sprinkling in some of that thought leadership can really be helpful. Like I said, I don't post on social media at all about the podcast, but I recently did a article because the BIPOC women in podcasting community that had been founded a couple years ago, and a lot of the women podcast communities have shut down in the last 4 years. And I was wondering, like, why? Like, why does this keep happening? Why do we keep seeing this take place where these communities have to shut down? And what are some spaces where we can maybe create micro communities for podcasters where they can feel supported and they can get the things that they need? Because podcasting alone is extremely boring and it can feel like you're talking into a void constantly. Maybe you have your guest
Yeah.
here, but for the most part, you're not interacting with your audience. It's just us here having a conversation and then sharing it, hoping people are listening, right? And so, like, to have other people that you can talk to about, hey, here's what's happening with my podcast, or how are you doing things? Like, having that space is so important. So, I did a full article about it. I didn't necessarily name, hey, this community is closing down and tagging the people, but the people found it because someone shared it with them or something. And they shared their thoughts and they were like, oh, thank you so much for bringing light to this, because it really is such a struggle to keep going with these communities when people want a ton of free content and it takes time and effort to curate all this stuff. And so that post was getting engagement for weeks, where I didn't need to post about the podcast. I didn't need to really post about anything else. I could just keep commenting back on that, or maybe sharing it with someone new. And so I think that you just got to figure out what's going to work for you. But I love all of the strategies that you gave. And I think that they're so key, especially for people who are like, I want to grow on LinkedIn. I want to see engagement on LinkedIn. Whereas I'm very passive with my LinkedIn strategy.
Yeah, I just want to say, getting back to the concept of promoting your podcast, like I've written books. I have 6 books, but I cannot with every post talk about my book.
Right.
And I think it's the same with the podcast. You just can't force it on people. So the less you talk about your podcast, but the more you remind people, like in that newsletter, okay, if you want to go deeper, here's the Spotify embed, subscribe to my pod. I think you have a banner image where you can put your podcast icon in there, listen on Spotify, Apple. You have these featured areas on LinkedIn where you can add a link to your podcast. You can add a special section in your profile. So there are ways to constantly remind people the fact you have a podcast. But if you just look at LinkedIn as a way of, I'm just going to drop a link to my latest podcast episode every week, it's not going to be a good journey for you. So and Alicia, I'm glad you brought up that example, because it's often the non-strategic things that we do that end up going viral. And I will say LinkedIn will religiously continue to push the posts that get engagement, and you'll get comments, you'll get likes like a week after 2 weeks. It's very common for that to happen. So you don't need to be publishing every day. If you get good engagement, LinkedIn will continue to show your old posts and you'll continue to get engagement on them. So don't feel stressed, but get started.
Yes.
That's the main point here.
So important. So if people are like, okay, yes, I need more Neil in my life, where can they check out your podcast, buy your books, absorb your content, all that fun stuff?
Well, my name is Neil Schaefer. I am the real Neil. So it's NEAL SCHAFFER. That's my neilschaefer.com. It's Neil Schaefer and all the socials. I just came out with the second edition of this book called Maximizing LinkedIn for
Yay.
Business Growth. So everything we talked about is in there. It just came out January 1st of 2026. So it's up to date. And my podcast is Your Digital Marketing Coach. Go to podcast.neilschaefer.com or do a search for it. And yeah, I'd love to keep the conversation going.
Awesome. And we'll have links for all of that in the show notes and the YouTube description for anyone doing other things. Make sure you check those down below so you can grab those links as well. Neil, thank you so much. This was so informative, and I'm excited for maybe what I do with LinkedIn in the future.
Yay.